The room was silent, but the world was watching. Thousands sat inside the Grand Hall in Tokyo, and millions more waited behind screens. Cameras pointed at the stage where Keanu Reeves stood, but he was not acting this time. There was no script, no director, no character to play. It was just a man, a microphone, and a truth he had never shared before. The host smiled and tried to begin like every normal interview, but something in Keanu's eyes made the air feel different. The audience expected stories about movies, fame, success, action scenes, maybe some funny memories from Hollywood sets, but Keanu was not smiling. He was calm, almost too calm, like someone who had carried a heavy story for years and finally decided to let it go. Before the host could even ask his first question, Keanu said 4 simple words that stopped every sound in the room. "I want silence first." That was the hook. Everyone leaned forward. Even Sandra Bullock, sitting in the first row, lifted her head a little. She had worked with Keanu for years, shared screens, shared jokes, shared memories, but she had never seen him like this. Something was about to happen. Something real. Something deep. Keanu looked down at his hands for a moment, as if he was gathering every piece of courage left in him. Then he raised his head and spoke again, voice slow, steady, and honest. "I am going to talk about a past that I never wanted the world to know, not because it is sad, but because it is real." The audience stayed frozen. No one moved. No one wanted to miss a single word. Keanu took a breath. "Many people know me because of the movies. They know the actor, the action scenes, the calm face, the internet jokes, the funny memes. But before the fame, before any of that, I was just a boy who had nothing, not even a place to sleep." Sandra's eyes slowly widened. The camera zoomed in on her face, but she showed no reaction. She just listened. Keanu continued. "There was a time in my life when I slept in bus stations. Not for one night. Not for 2. For months. I washed my face in public bathrooms. I ate leftovers that strangers forgot on tables. I lived in the kind of silence where no one even knows you exist." A small gasp spread through the hall. No one ever imagined this. A star loved by millions, once invisible to the world. Keanu did not stop. "I was not always strong. I was not always calm. I was not always the person people think I am now. There was a time when I believed I was not meant to be loved, that I was just passing through the world without leaving a single mark." The host lowered his eyes. The hall felt heavier now. The voice of a man who carried pain without ever showing it was speaking for the first time. Sandra slowly placed her hand on her chest, like something inside her was waking up. She did not know where this story was going, but something in Keanu's voice felt familiar. Too familiar? Keanu looked at the crowd again. But something changed. Not because of fame. Not because of success. Not because I worked hard. Something changed because one day, someone showed me kindness when I did not deserve any. Suspense filled the hall. Everyone wanted to know who that person was. A friend? A stranger? A fan? A family member? Keanu kept building the tension. I never saw her again. Not for many years. But that day, when the world felt cold and nothing made sense, one human act changed me. One plate of food. One small moment. One person who sat with me when everyone else walked away. Sandra blinked slowly. Something inside her heart moved. One plate of food. One small moment. She had done that many times in her life. She had helped strangers before she was even famous. She never expected anything back. She never even remembered their faces. But her eyes stayed on Keanu. Something in her wanted to know more. Her breathing changed. Her fingers pressed slowly into her chair. Keanu paused. He looked down again. The hall waited in absolute silence. He was not trying to create drama. This was simply a man telling the truth to the world. "I was sitting on a cold concrete floor outside a small store. I was hungry. Not movie hungry. Not diet hungry. Real hunger. The kind that makes your body shake. People walked past me like I was nothing. They looked through me, like I did not exist. And then she sat down." Keanu looked to the front row, straight at Sandra. She did not blink. She was not rich, not famous, not dressed like a hero. She just sat beside me, close enough so I could feel that I was not alone. She did not ask who I was. She did not judge. She shared her food, one bite at a time, and talked to me like I was a normal human being. For the first time in many months, I felt seen. I felt alive again. Something changed in Sandra's eyes. A memory from long ago flickered inside her. But she still did not speak. Her breathing slowed. Her mind tried to remember that night, that moment, that face. Keanu's voice softened even more. I did not know her name. I never asked. I did not want to make her feel like she had to explain her kindness. After we ate, she smiled, stood up, and walked away. I never forgot that smile. The world was loud, but that one moment was quiet. It saved me. The hall was silent like a prayer room. No one moved. Keanu stepped back from the microphone, almost as if he was letting the truth rest inside the room. His voice lowered. And the world thinks I changed because of Hollywood? No. I changed because someone treated me like a human when I felt like a shadow. Keanu slowly turned his head toward Sandra. Not as an actor, not as a co-star, but as a man who had held a secret for years. The camera caught Sandra's face. Her eyes were now wet, emotional, confused, but also soft. Like her heart was recognizing something old. Keanu looked at her gently, and the crowd followed his gaze. Now the suspense was not just in the story. It was in the present moment. Was it her? Was she the one? Did she save him long before they ever met again? No one in the room knew the answer. Not yet. Not even Sandra, but every viewer watching could feel it. The story was no longer just a past memory. It was alive right now. It was in the air. It was in the silence. It was in the way Sandra's hands trembled slightly. Keanu took one slow step toward the front of the stage. His eyes never left hers. The whole world held its breath. The hall was still silent when part one ended, but the silence did not feel empty. It felt like a question hanging in the air, a question no one wanted to interrupt. Everyone waited for Keanu to continue, but he did not speak right away. He stood still, almost like he was letting the weight of the moment settle. Sandra watched him closely. Her eyes were soft, but her mind was racing. Something deep inside her remembered the image of a lonely boy, a cold night, a shared meal. But the memory was not fully clear yet. It was like a photograph that time had blurred. Keanu stepped closer to the audience now, not hiding behind the microphone anymore. His voice was gentle, almost calm, but every word carried emotion. I want to tell you something that might not make sense now, but one act of kindness can live inside a person for years, even if the world forgets it ever happened. He looked at the audience, then at Sandra again. When I became successful, people thought I was humble because I was born that way. But I was not always humble. I was shaped by moments that taught me what it means to be human. That day, when someone sat beside me instead of walking past me, that became the reason I treat people the way I do today. Sandra's hand moved slowly to her chin. Her expression was no longer still. She was starting to feel something familiar, but it was distant, like a dream she once had but never fully understood. Keanu continued. I spent years trying to find that person again, not because I wanted to thank her for the food, but because she reminded me that I was not invisible. She reminded me that there is always someone who sees us, even when we think no one ever will. He paused there. The audience felt it, the emotional pull, the suspense, the truth that was slowly rising to the surface. Sandra looked down for a short moment. Her mind was working, searching, rewinding through time. There were so many people she helped during her early years. She never asked for names. She never expected anything back. She just believed in being kind when she could. And now one of those moments was standing on stage. Remembering her, Keanu looked at the crowd again. I never found her, at least not for many years. Life went on. People called me lucky. People called me strong. People said I was wise. But all I ever was someone shaped by a small moment that the world never saw. There was an ache in his voice now, a quiet ache. Not for pain, but for truth. Sandra swallowed slowly, like her heart was catching up with her mind. Keanu took a few steps toward the edge of the stage, closer to the front row. And then something happened. Years later, on a movie set, I met someone who laughed the same way she did, spoke with the same gentle tone, cared for people without trying to impress anyone. Someone who looked at crew members the same way she looked at stars. Someone who shared kindness not to make a story, but because it was her nature. The crowd turned toward Sandra almost in unison. She still did not speak. She kept her eyes on Keanu, but now there was fear mixed with emotion, not fear of embarrassment, not fear of exposure. Fear of realizing that fate had connected two lives long before they even knew each other's names. Keanu's voice softened even more. I did not recognize her right away. Years had passed. Lives had changed. But when I saw her offer food to a young assistant who was too shy to take it, I remembered that night. I remembered the warmth. I remembered the simple act that saved me. Sandra closed her eyes for 2 seconds. That was the moment. The memory snapped into focus. The cold floor, the quiet boy, the shared meal, the smile she gave him, the way he said thank you without speaking much. She remembered it now. Clearly. Deeply. And for the first time, she realized something she had never known. That boy was Keanu. She opened her eyes again. She did not speak. She could not speak. Her heart was full and heavy and shaking all at the same time. Keanu stepped closer. The world watched in complete tension. I never told her, not once, because I wanted her to know that her kindness was real. Long before she knew she gave it to someone who would one day be known, he looked at her with pure honesty, and I never said it, because I did not want to turn her kindness into a headline. Sandra's eyes were now wet, but she was not crying out loud. She was feeling, deep, quietly, respectfully, the kind of emotion that does not need performance or sound. Keanu faced the audience again. The truth is, the world sees my life today, but the reason I did not break years ago was because one stranger sat beside me and treated me like a human being. His voice lowered, almost like a whisper. And that stranger is sitting in this room right now. Gasps spread through the hall like a wave. Cameras zoomed in, hearts pounded. Every viewer behind every screen felt the emotional electricity of the moment. But Keanu did not turn to her yet. He let the suspense breathe. He let the truth settle. I know she does not remember that night the way I do, because to her it was just kindness. But to me, it was survival. It was hope. It was the reason I am still here. He finally turned toward Sandra again. I knew from that moment on that one day I would tell the world, not about me, but about people like her. People who changed lives without ever trying to be heroes. The hall was quiet. Even breathing sounded loud. Sandra slowly stood up. Her eyes were full, not of guilt, not of pressure, but of a silent emotion that only kindness can create. She did not speak. She did not move fast. She simply walked toward the stage. People watched her like they were watching time itself, connect two moments that were never supposed to meet again. She reached the steps. Keanu did not reach out for her. He just waited, respectfully, humbly. When she finally stood beside him, she did not speak a single word. She just held his hand, no script, no applause, no spotlight moment, just one hand in another, and the same way kindness once reached across. Silence years ago, then something unexpected happened. Not dramatic, not loud, but emotional in the purest way. The audience did not clap. They stood, but they did not clap. They stayed quiet. Because some moments do not need noise. Keanu looked at their hands, joined in the center of the stage, and whispered gently, only loud enough for the room to hear. I kept searching for the moment to thank you. But now I know. Gratitude is not something we speak. It is something we live. Sandra's fingers tightened around his. Not to show support, but to say she understood, she did not need words. Keanu did not need to explain more. The world had already understood the story. But the story was not finished. Yet this was only the reveal. What came next would change everything. Because the world thought this was just an emotional interview, but something much bigger was waiting behind it. The world thought the moment was over, but it was only the beginning. The silence in the hall was not empty. It was full. Full of emotion, full of questions, full of something deeper than applause. The cameras were still rolling. Millions were still watching, but no one wanted to break the quiet connection happening on stage. Keanu and Sandra stood there hand in hand without a script, without a speech, without any Hollywood performance. It was real, too real, and that was why people could not look away. The host tried to speak, but his voice felt out of place, like sound did not belong in this kind of moment. He cleared his throat gently and said in a soft tone, "Keanu, do you want to continue?" But Keanu did not answer immediately. He looked at Sandra, and something unspoken passed between them. It was not about the past anymore. It was about what this truth meant now. Then Keanu nodded slowly. "Yes, because this story is not just mine, and it is not just hers. It is a reminder for everyone who ever felt unseen." The audience leaned forward again. They were locked in. No one wanted to blink. Keanu let go of Sandra's hand for a moment, but only so he could face the crowd with both hands open like he was offering something. "I did not come here to shock anyone. I came here to show that the strongest moments in life are the ones no one sees. Not the awards, not the movies, not the headlines, the moments when someone gives without expecting anything back." Sandra walked to the edge of the stage and sat in the front row again. But now her posture was different. She was not just a guest anymore. She was a part of the story, and everyone could feel it. Keanu continued, "I am not sharing this story to make people feel sorry for me. I am sharing it because I want people to understand that the smallest act of kindness can change a life. You might not even remember doing it, but someone else might remember it forever." The crowd agreed without speaking. Every viewer felt the truth inside those words. People started thinking about moments in their own lives. Times when someone helped them. Times when they helped someone else. Times they never spoke about again but never forgot. Keanu looked around the room. We live in a world where people think strength is about winning. But sometimes, strength is about admitting that someone helped you stand when you could not walk alone. A crew member standing near the stage wiped tears quietly, trying not to be noticed. But Keanu noticed. He smiled at him, not as a star, but as a person who understood silent emotion. Then something unexpected happened. The host received a note in his earpiece. The producer wanted to cut to commercial break. The show was scheduled. The time was ticking. But the host hesitated. He looked at the floor, then at Keanu, and he made a choice. He said gently, "We are going to stay live. This moment is more important than the schedule." The audience whispered in surprise. The world was watching something that did not follow the rules of television anymore. It was not a show. It was life happening in real time. Keanu looked down for a moment and said, "I want to show you something." He turned toward the back of the stage and snapped his fingers once. A large screen lit up behind him. It showed a dark street, a cold night, and a boy sitting on the ground with his arms around his knees. That boy was young Keanu. The hall froze again. The picture was not high quality. It was from an old security camera. But it was real, Keanu explained. This image was recorded outside a small store in Toronto. I never knew this footage existed until last year. Someone found it and sent it to me. But what matters is not that I was sitting there. He tapped the screen. What matters is that, a minute later, this happened. The clip played. A young woman entered the frame. She was wearing a coat, hair slightly messy from the cold wind, holding a small paper bag. She walked toward the boy, sat beside him, and handed him food. She smiled. He looked confused, then shy, then grateful. They spoke for a few minutes. Then she stood up, touched his shoulder gently, and walked away. The room gasped softly, because the young woman in the video looked exactly like Sandra Bullock. And now, it was not just a story. It was proof. The audience turned to look at Sandra. She stared at the screen like she was seeing a ghost from her own past. Her hands covered her mouth. The memory was no longer foggy. It was clear, real, unquestionable. It was her. That was the night she gave food to a stranger she never expected to meet again. Keanu spoke gently. I never knew this footage existed. I never searched for it. But it found me, just like the truth always does. Sandra whispered something to herself, but no one could hear it. It was not for the world. It was for her own heart, Keanu continued, voice steady. This is not a story about a movie star helping a future actor. This is a story about a person who helped another person. She did not know who I was. She did not care who I would become. She just cared that I was hungry. The room was full of emotion again, but this time something deeper was building. The story was changing shape. It was no longer about revelation. It was becoming something bigger, something with purpose. Keanu looked at the audience again, but his tone changed. It became stronger. I want to honor that moment, not with a speech, not with a trophy, not with a shout, but with something that lives longer than us. The suspense grew again. Then he said the words that shifted the entire direction of this event. I am starting something today, not under my name, under hers. A global kindness project for people who were once invisible. It will feed the hungry. It will shelter the tired. It will teach people what a single act can do. The audience broke into emotional applause. This time, it was not applause for fame. It was applause for purpose. But Keanu was not finished. I will fund the first $1 million myself, but the true value of this project will not be money. It will be people. People who decide to sit beside someone instead of walking past them. Sandra stood again. Tears filled her eyes, but she was not crying from sadness. She was crying from truth. She walked to the stage slowly, not because she wanted attention, but because something inside her told her she needed to stand beside him again. When she reached him, she did the same thing she did years ago. She sat on the stage floor, next to him, and the hall understood the meaning. Keanu sat beside her. Two people, no spotlight. No stage rules. Now the message was clear. They were showing the world what kindness looks like when it comes full circle. No fame, no ego, no script. Just a boy who was once hungry, and a girl who once shared what little she had, meeting again as two humans who never forgot the feeling of being real. The whole world felt it. But the story was not done because the reveal had happened, but the world did not yet know what Sandra would do next, and what she did would take the story to a level no one expected. The world had already felt the emotional shock, but something even deeper was coming. The screen behind them faded to black. The hall was silent again, and everyone waited to see what Sandra would do next. Up until now, she had only listened, remembered, and held Keanu's hand. She had spoken no words, but now all eyes were on her. Sandra stood slowly. She did not walk to the microphone. She did not give a speech. Instead, she turned to Keanu, placed one hand on his shoulder, and then faced the audience. Her voice was soft, steady, and almost fragile. I did not know it was him. I did not know who he would become. I was not trying to change a life. I was just trying to be human. The room listened with complete attention. Even the air felt still. I do not want credit. I do not want praise. Kindness is not a performance. It is something we do when no one is watching. She paused, then looked at the crowd with a quiet sadness. I wish I could say I remembered every person I helped, but I do not. And maybe that is the point. We do not always get to see the full story of our own kindness. Sometimes it returns years later in a way we never imagined. Keanu watched her, eyes full of respect, not emotion for show, but emotion that lived in silence. Sandra continued. I did not come here to be honored, but if we are honoring anything today, let it not be me. Let it be the idea that kindness never dies. It just waits. And one day, it comes back. The audience did not clap. They absorbed the words. Then Sandra turned to Keanu and whispered, but the microphone still caught it softly. If one moment of kindness shaped your life, then let us shape 1,000 more. She looked at the audience again. I will match every dollar Keanu donates, not because of who he is now, but because of who he was that night. The room reacted with shock and emotion. 2 stars had just turned a memory into a mission. But that was not the twist. Sandra stepped back and said, and I am not giving money to be thanked. I am giving it because someone once taught me that love without words is the strongest. Kind. Then she did something no one expected. She knelt beside Keanu on stage again. 2 stars on the ground on purpose, to show the world that no one is too big to kneel for. Kindness. Keanu placed his hand over hers. There were no tears now, only calm, only truth. They were not acting. They were teaching, and the world was learning. But something else was still unrevealed, because Keanu had thanked Sandra. Sandra had responded with action. But one more truth was waiting, a truth that would change the story again, and that truth was not about the past. It was about who Keanu helped because of what she once did. The world believed the emotional peak had already happened, but the story still had one more layer hidden underneath everything. People were moved by the past, inspired by the kindness, and shocked by the reveal. But they still did not know the full truth. Not about Keanu, not about Sandra, not about the boy on the street, and not about what happened after that night. Keanu stood again, but this time, there was no pain in his voice. There was strength. The kind of strength that is not loud but unbreakable. "Everyone knows what Sandra once did for me," he said slowly, "but I never told the world what that moment made me do next." The audience leaned forward. The cameras zoomed in again. This was not the emotional confession anymore. This was the missing piece. Keanu continued. "I was saved by a stranger. I did not know her name. I did not know her story. But I knew one thing that night. If one person can save me with a small act, then one day I want to give that same feeling to someone else." He paused, letting the idea settle. "But I did not wait until I became famous. I did not wait until I was rich. The first time I ever helped someone, I still had nothing. I still slept in corners. I still looked like a stranger. But I had one thing she gave me. Belief." The room listened with complete silence. There was a kid, maybe 12, maybe younger. He used to hide behind a fast food place and wait for people to throw away leftovers. One night I saw myself in him. I saw the hunger, the shame, the silence. So I sat beside him, the same way she once sat beside me. Keanu looked at Sandra when he said she. Sandra lowered her eyes, humbled by the quiet echo of her own kindness living on in someone else. "I bought him food," Keanu continued. "We did not talk much. I did not ask where he came from. I just wanted him to feel human. And before I left, he looked at me the same way I once looked at her, confused, grateful, and a little less alone." That sentence hit deep, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. But the story was not finished. Keanu then said something that shifted every emotion in the hall again. "That boy is in this room today." The entire hall moved like a wave of shock. People looked around, whispering, searching. Even Sandra's eyes widened as she slowly turned her head, unsure who it could be. Keanu raised his hand and pointed toward the back of the hall. A man stood up. Calm, humble, no spotlight, no attention-seeking. He walked slowly toward the stage. The cameras followed him. He was not a teenager anymore. He was in his 30s now, dressed simply. Not famous, not rich, but his face carried the same quiet softness Keanu once described. When he reached the stage, Keanu stepped down and hugged him. Not a Hollywood hug, a real one. Long, human, grateful. The audience understood now. This was not a story about 2 stars. This was a chain of kindness. One meal, one boy, one stranger. One life changed and then passed. Forward again and again and again, Keanu introduced him. "This is Michael, the first person I ever helped. And the first person to teach me that kindness should never stop with one moment. It should keep moving, like a circle." Michael took the microphone slowly. He was not comfortable speaking, but his voice was honest. "I never knew who he was. He never said he was an actor. He never said he was anyone special. He just treated me like I mattered. And that night, I promised myself that if I ever got the chance, I would help someone the same way." He smiled softly. And I did. The hall stayed silent, emotional, respectful. Keanu stepped in again. Michael now works for a shelter program. He feeds kids the same age he once was. Kids who feel invisible. Kids who feel forgotten. He became the same light someone once gave him. People wiped tears, not because it was sad, but because it was beautiful. Sandra looked at Michael. Her eyes were full of something deeper than surprise. She saw proof that the kindness she once forgot had never forgotten her. Then Michael turned to her and said something no one expected. "You do not remember me, but I remember you." Sandra froze. Her breath stopped. "Years later," Michael continued, "I saw a photo of you at an event with Keanu. I realized you were the woman from that night, the one who shared her food. I did not know your name then, but I never forgot your face." Sandra was speechless, not from pressure, but from the shock of realizing that her small, anonymous act had now touched 3 lives, and was still spreading. Michael continued, "You saved him. He saved me. I saved someone else. And now that person is helping another. That is what kindness does. It travels." The hall finally broke into applause. Not loud applause, emotional applause. The kind people give when a message goes deeper than words. Keanu spoke again. This is why the Kindness Project is not about charity. It is about legacy, a legacy that does not live in statues or awards, a legacy that lives in people. Then he turned to Sandra. You started something without knowing, and now it is bigger than all of us. Sandra finally spoke, voice trembling but filled with truth. I did not save anyone. I just shared what I had. Keanu nodded. And because you did, the world is different now. Then, in a moment no one expected, Michael stood between Keanu and Sandra and took both of their hands. 3 hands, 3 lives, 1 chain, 1 message. The screen behind them lit up again, but this time with a single sentence. Kindness moves forward, and for the first time in the whole event, the applause rose loud. Not for fame, not for celebrity, but for humanity. But the story was not finished. Yet, because the world thought this was the final reveal, but one more truth was coming. Not about the past, about what Sandra was about to do next, and it would change the movement forever. The hall was filled with emotion, but the story still had one final turn. Keanu had revealed his past. Sandra had remembered her forgotten act of kindness. Michael had shown how the chain continued. The audience thought the message was complete, but Sandra was not finished. She stood again, slow and calm, and walked to the center of the stage. Keanu and Michael stepped back, letting her speak. This was her moment now. Not because she was a star, but because the story had come full circle through her. She looked at the crowd with gentle eyes and said, I never planned any of this. I never expected to see that boy again. I never thought one meal would return years later in a way like this. But now that it has, I cannot just walk away. The audience leaned in. Her voice carried honesty, not performance. Keanu is starting a kindness project. He offered the first $1 million. I matched it. But that is not enough. Kindness is not a donation. It is a lifestyle. She paused. The entire hall stayed silent, so I am making a promise today. For the rest of my life, I will give a part of my income, my time, and my voice to help people like those boys we once were. The room reacted with emotion, but Sandra lifted her hand gently, stopping the applause before it could start. This is not a moment to clap. This is a moment to act. She turned to Keanu. You said I saved you, but the truth is, you remembered. You carried it. You passed it forward. You kept the light alive. Then she turned to Michael. And you proved that kindness is not something we keep. It is something we pass on. Keanu stepped forward again and said, From this day forward, we will build something that does not belong to fame or movies. It belongs to anyone who refuses to walk past someone in pain. The screen behind them lit up once more. This time, with a name neither of them expected until this moment. The Circle Foundation. Keanu smiled. Sandra smiled. Michael smiled. A foundation not named after a person, not about who started it, but about what it represents. Because every act of kindness is a circle that returns, then something happened that no scriptwriter could plan. People in the audience stood up one by one, not for applause, but to raise their hands, silently, making a promise to continue the circle in their own lives. No music, no drama, just a movement being born in real time. Keanu watched and whispered, This is what hope looks like. Sandra placed her hand on his again, like she did in the beginning, but now the moment had changed. The boy was no longer hungry, the woman was no longer a stranger, the act was no longer forgotten, and the world was no longer silent. Because kindness had spoken, without needing noise, and that is how a meal on a sidewalk turned into a movement that would live longer than any of them. The camera zoomed out slowly as the 3 stood together. Keanu, Sandra, Michael, not heroes, just humans trying to keep the circle alive.